"You won't believe what happened to my friend Emily a few years back. She swears it's all true, and after hearing her story, I'm half convinced ghosts are real. It starts with a marriage that everyone saw as a disaster waiting to happen, except Emily, who was too blinded by love to care. She was only 19 when she announced she was tying the knot with Trevor Jones, a guy with a reputation that could make your skin crawl. Her parents begged her to reconsider, her friends practically staged an intervention, but Emily wouldn't hear it. Trevor was trouble, everyone knew it. He was the kind of guy who'd stumble into bar fights, hang out with sketchy drifters, and drink like his life depended on it. Sure, he had charm, a quick wit, and a smile that could melt hearts, but living with him? That was a nightmare no one wanted for her. Emily didn't care that Trevor had no money, no real job, and zero ambition to change. She saw him as her wild, rebellious soulmate, and at 19, maybe she was too young to see the red flags waving like banners in a storm. Her parents cried through the whole wedding, not tears of joy, mind you, but heartbreak. They were handing their bright, beautiful daughter over to a man who didn't deserve her in a million years. The reception was tense, with forced smiles and whispered worries, but Emily glowed like she'd won the lottery. She had no idea what was coming. Life with Trevor started unraveling fast. At first, she tried to brush it off, his drinking, his loud mouth, the way he'd ignore her like she was invisible. But it got worse. He'd stumble home wasted, reeking of cheap beer, and soon he started inviting his buddies over. These weren't the kind of friends you'd want around, rough, rowdy guys who'd knock back whiskey until they could barely stand. It always ended the same way. Someone would bring up an old grudge, fists would fly, and by morning, the living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Broken chairs, shattered plates, cigarette butts stubbed out on the carpet. Emily would hide in the bedroom, pressing a pillow over her ears to drown out the chaos. If it got really bad, she'd lock herself in the bathroom, sitting on the cold tile, wondering how her fairy tale had turned into this. She didn't tell her parents. They'd worried enough, and she couldn't bear the thought of them knowing how right they'd been. Mornings were the worst. She'd creep out to find Trevor sprawled on the couch or the floor, drooling and half dead to the world. If his friends were still there, she'd have to shoo them out like stray dogs, their slurred protests echoing down the hall. Trevor quit his dead-end job at some warehouse not long after the wedding, leaving Emily to pay the bills. She worked double shifts at a diner, her hands raw from scrubbing plates, while he slept off hangovers. Less than a year in, her world lost all color. It was a gray, suffocating hell. She tried talking to him, pleading for change, but it was like shouting into a void. Mention divorce, though, and he'd flip, his eyes would darken, his voice would growl, and she'd shrink back, afraid of what he might do next. Trevor got paranoid, too. He'd accuse her of cheating, his jealousy flaring up over nothing, a glance from a coworker, a text from a friend. He'd scream, throw things, and eventually, he started hitting her. Not often, but enough to leave marks she'd hide under long sleeves. It didn't last long, though, not because he stopped, but because fate stepped in. One night, Trevor and his crew were staggering home from a dive bar. They were so drunk they couldn't see straight, weaving down a pitch-black road with no streetlights. A truck came out of nowhere, tires squealed, metal crunched, and when the dust settled, Trevor was the only one who didn't walk away. The others got bruises and a scare. He got a one-way ticket to the morgue. Emily didn't shed a tear. She felt like she'd been let out of a cage. Her parents hugged her tight, her friends toasted to her freedom, and she told herself she'd never fall for a guy like that again. She was still young, barely 20, with her whole life ahead of her. The apartment felt lighter without him, like the air wasn't so thick with tension. She thought the nightmare was over. She was wrong. About a month after Trevor's death, right around the 40-day mark, if you believe in that kind of thing, weird stuff started happening. It was little things at first, the fridge door swinging open in the middle of the night, a jar of pickles crashing to the floor. She'd wake up to clothes spilling out of the closet like someone had rummaged through it. The curtain rod in the living room fell 3 times in 1 week, the heavy drapes crumpled on the carpet as if yanked by an angry hand. At night, she'd hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, creaking across the hardwood. She'd lie there, heart pounding, telling herself it was the neighbors or the old building settling. But deep down, she knew better. Then the TV started turning on by itself. Always around 2 a.m., the screen flickering to life with static before settling on some late-night car show. Trevor's favorite. She'd huddle under the blankets, too scared to move, the volume blaring through the walls. Sleep became a stranger. She'd drag herself to work, her eyes sunken, her skin pale, and people started whispering she looked like a ghost herself. She told a few coworkers about it, hoping for advice, but they just patted her arm and said it was grief playing tricks. "You lost your husband," they'd say. "Even a jerk like him leaves a mark." She wanted to believe them, but the footsteps, the TV, it wasn't her imagination. For a while, it'd stop. A week of quiet, maybe two, and she'd convince herself it was over. She'd light candles, play music, try to reclaim her space. But then it'd come back, worse than before. One night, she jolted awake to a loud crash in the hall. The coat rack by the door had toppled, jackets and bags scattered everywhere. Groggy, she shuffled out to clean it up, her bare feet cold against the floor. She reached for the light switch, and froze. In the dim glow from the street lamp outside, she saw him. A shadowy figure sprawled in the hallway, struggling to stand. He kept slipping, arms flailing, knocking the rack over again. Her breath caught in her throat, her body locked in place. The figure groaned, a low, guttural sound, and stretched a hand toward her, fingers trembling like it wanted her to pull it up. She couldn't scream, couldn't run. Her mind raced back to a memory, her grandma, years ago, telling her, "If you ever see a spirit, ask who it is. If it answers, it's not evil. If it doesn't, run." Her voice shook as she whispered, "Who are you?" The air turned icy. Then came the reply, a rasping, bone-chilling hiss, like an old hag gargling gravel. "Who else? Your husband." Her knees buckled. She stumbled back, bolted to her room, and dove under the covers, shaking until dawn. The hallway stayed quiet after that, but she could still feel him out there, lingering. The next day, she broke down. It was Trevor, had to be. He'd come home like that so many times, drunk and helpless, begging her to drag him to bed. Now he was dead, and he wouldn't leave her alone. She called a priest, but he couldn't come until Monday. That left her with 2 days to survive. Her parents' place was packed with visiting cousins, her best friend was shacked up with her boyfriend, no one could take her in. She was trapped. Desperate, she remembered a guy I know from a nearby town who'd once raved about a psychic who'd fixed his haunted basement problem. She got the number and dialed, her voice cracking as she begged the woman to come. An hour later, Maria showed up, a plump, gray-haired lady in a cardigan, looking more like a librarian than a medium. She walked through the apartment, running her hands over the walls, the couch, the fridge. "He's still here," she said, her tone flat. Emily stammered, "But he's dead." "That's impossible." Maria shrugged. "Not impossible. He doesn't know he's gone. Died too fast, too drunk. He's stuck, wandering in his own little purgatory, thinking he's still kicking. Opens the fridge, flips on the TV, sound familiar." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He was a sinner," Maria went on. "This place stinks of booze and bad choices. He's not welcome upstairs or down below, so he's here. We've got to send him packing, or he'll wear you out." Maria paused, her eyes narrowing. "Heard his voice yet?" Emily swallowed. "Yeah, last night. But it didn't sound like him, it was wrong." Maria nodded grimly. "That's what he sounds like now. Cursed, rotten. I'll do a ritual. Wait outside, it's not for your eyes. He'll be gone by morning, but he'll fight tonight. At 3 a.m., come out and tell him, loud and clear, get out. You're dead. I'm in charge. Don't skip it, or he'll stay. Call a priest after to seal it." Emily felt sick, but she nodded. She stood on the stairwell for over an hour, shivering in her pajamas, while muffled chants and the smell of sage drifted through the door. Maria emerged sweaty and stern, promising Trevor would be gone by sunrise. That night, Emily waited. It was quiet at first, too quiet. She almost hoped it was over already. Then, around midnight, a bang echoed from the hall. Her stomach dropped. The noises grew, shuffling, thumping, something dragging across the floor. She curled into a ball, clutching her blanket, her pulse racing. Emily, that awful voice slithered through the dark, high and cracked. She bit her lip to keep from screaming, tears soaking her pillow. The kitchen erupted, plates smashing, cabinet slamming. She checked her watch, 2:45 a.m. 15 minutes to go. The chaos got louder, closer. "Emily, where are you?" it crooned, mocking her. She gripped the watch, counting down. At 3 o'clock, she forced herself up, legs trembling. The apartment was a war zone, dishes shattered, chairs tipped over. She stepped into the kitchen and saw him, a black silhouette, hunched and swaying, just like Trevor after a bender. He wheezed, his outline flickering in the dark. She sucked in a breath and yelled, "Get out. You're dead. I'm in charge." The figure lurched, doubling over like it had been punched, and let out a wail, a shriek that clawed at her skull. She fumbled for the light switch, but it clicked uselessly. He hit the floor with a thud, one arm reaching out. "Help me, Emily," that voice rasped, pitiful and furious. "Get out. You're dead," she screamed again, her throat raw. "No, no, not dead, no," he moaned, over and over, like a broken record. She ran back to her room, slammed the door, and pressed her hands to her ears until the words faded. Exhaustion hit, and she blacked out. Sunlight woke her. The apartment was silent, eerily so. She crept out, stepping over broken glass and scattered coats. No footsteps, no voices. She cleaned up in a daze, her body heavy but her heart lighter. That night, she slept, really slept, for the first time in weeks, a relieved sob catching in her throat as she drifted off. The priest came Monday, blessed the place, and left her with a candle to burn for good measure. The weirdness stopped. No more shadows, no more late-night TV. Emily started healing, the fear fading like a bad dream. Months later, she met a guy, quiet, steady, the opposite of Trevor. They're married now, happy. She doesn't talk about her first husband much, and he's never shown up in her nightmares. Sometimes, she'll pause at a random noise, a creak, a thud, but then she laughs it off. "Probably just the wind," she says. "Probably."